Season 1 of Gossip Girl is set in Manhattan's Upper East Side, where the mysterious titular blogger documents the lives, secrets, and scandals of the area's affluent residents. That gossip includes the return of the high school's popular it girl Serena Van Der Woodsen, who abruptly and mysteriously left for a stint in boarding school the year prior, but has returned to help care for her younger brother Eric amidst a bout of depression. Serena's return leads to complicated feelings for her old best friend Blair Waldorf, who has become the most popular girl at school in her absence. The friendship between Blair and Serena is further shattered when Blair uncovers a secret from before Serena's original departure. She'd had an affair and taken the virginity of Blair's longtime boyfriend Nate Archibald. As Blair and Nate's relationship becomes strained over this revelation, Blair secretly turns to Nate's childhood best friend Chuck Bass, the bad boy of the Upper East Side. Other high school students include the siblings Dan and Jenny Humphrey. Both come from an artistic and less wealthy family, making them outsiders amongst their affluent classmates. When a drunken Chuck tries to assault Jenny at a party, Dan intervenes, leading to a rivalry between the two men. Dan has long harbored a crush on Serena, and now that she has returned, he is finally able to pursue a romantic relationship with her. That burgeoning romance is complicated when Dan's childhood friend Vanessa returns to the city with her own long harbored feelings toward Dan. Unbeknownst to Dan and Jenny, their father Rufus had previously had an affair with Serena's mother Lily, and is now hoping to rekindle their own romance. Unfortunately for him, Lily actually gets engaged to Chuck's extremely powerful and wealthy father, Bart. Serena struggles with her mother's engagement to Bart Bass, and now living with her future stepbrother, the lecherous Chuck. Over time, Serena realizes that there is much more to Chuck than she initially thought, and the pair grow closer and develop a genuine friendship and sibling bond. When Nate discovers Blair's growing feelings for Chuck, he cuts both his girlfriend and his best friend out of his life. As Blair attempts to pursue a genuine relationship with Chuck, the womanizing bad boy is afraid of committing to her and ends their relationship. Amidst Blair's heartbreak, she takes Jenny under her wings to join the popular clique. But as Jenny grows in popularity, she ultimately usurps Blair as Queen Bee at school. As Blair loses her boyfriend, her crush, and her popular status at school, she finds comfort in her old friend Serena, and the two reconcile. As Chuck eventually realizes his true love for Blair, he reconciles with her and the pair make plans for a romantic getaway to Tuscany. Chuck also apologizes to Nate and affirms that he sees Blair as more than just another woman to objectify. But the day of their planned departure, Chuck gets cold feet and abandons Blair, leaving her heartbroken. Now single, Nate has a short fling with Vanessa, though he still harbors a secret love for the girl who took his virginity, Serena. Nate also has a complicated relationship with his father, the captain, who has a specific life path he wants his golden boy son to follow, whether Nate agrees or not. As Nate becomes frustrated by his strict parents and his desire to live his own life and make his own decisions, the captain begins to develop a drug problem. Nate painfully allows his father to be arrested for embezzling money and admonishes him as he chooses to flee the country instead of taking accountability for his actions. As the season comes to a close, Serena's life is turned upside down when her old friend Georgina returns to the Upper East Side. Serena and Georgina used to live a hard partying lifestyle with copious amounts of drugs and alcohol, and while Serena is trying to better herself, Georgina wants to pull her old friend back into debauchery. As Serena rebukes Georgina's destructive ways, Georgina makes it her mission to ruin Serena's new life in an effort to force her back into her old one. She blackmails Serena with a sex tape she secretly recorded of her, drugs her to force her into missing the SATs, gets closer to Dan to drive a wedge in their relationship, publicly outs Serena's brother Eric as gay, and even threatens to reveal the truth behind Serena's original disappearance, supplying a classmate named Pete with drugs that he then overdosed on. As Serena tries to cover up her past to avoid her new lover Dan from finding out, her constant lies are what leads Dan to ultimately breaking up with her. Unaware of Georgina's duplicitous nature, Dan is then seduced by her, oblivious to Georgina's plan of sleeping with him as the ultimate revenge against Serena. Blair helps Serena expose the truth about Georgina to Dan, and even reveals her villainous and debaucherous antics to her parents, who then send Georgina to a grueling boot camp for troubled girls in the hopes of reforming her. Despite the truth behind Georgina's machinations now being exposed, Dan refuses to reconcile with Serena, leaving her heartbroken. While the students of the Upper East Side enjoy their summer vacation, I want to thank this video's sponsor, Skillshare. I've wanted to learn how to better use Adobe After Effects for a while now, and thanks to some classes on Skillshare, I now know how to make motion graphics like this. Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of classes for creative and curious people on topics including illustration, design, photography, video, freelancing, and more. Whether it's for your career, your hobby, your passion, or even your side hustle, Skillshare can help you elevate your skills to the next level. As a YouTuber, I've not only used Skillshare classes to up my game in aspects like Adobe Premiere or Photoshop, but also marketing and analytics. Some of these classes are even taught by successful YouTubers like Marques Brownlee, so I know that the skills I learned from those courses come from a proven source. I personally started my After Effects journey with Hong Chu Gao's excellent beginner's course. Then I moved on to Jordi Vandeput's class where I learned how to create so many fun and cool motion graphics to really up the production value of my content and also just have some fun. This November, Skillshare is choosing to emphasize gratitude. All month long, they'll be sharing content on their social channels that celebrates the community, highlights stories of growth, and acknowledges that a personal creative habit can be its own gratitude practice. So head on over to Skillshare and sign up for a free trial so you can redefine your work or achieve a new goal this year. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will get a 1-month free trial to Skillshare. So hurry up and click that link and get started today. Thanks so much to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to the recap. In Season 2 of Gossip Girl, the residents of the Upper East Side return from their summer vacations. Nate has begun an affair with an older married duchess named Catherine, though secretly they have come to an arrangement where Nate will sleep with her in exchange for her help in clearing his father's debts, who is currently in hiding from the FBI. Chuck is finally ready to pursue his feelings for Blair, but she returns from her vacation now dating Catherine's stepson Marcus. When Blair discovers that the mother and stepson are having a secret love affair of their own, she ends her new relationship and blackmails Catherine into fully clearing the Archibald family's debts. Unfortunately, Blair then discovers that she hasn't been accepted to her dream college, Yale, and begins a downward emotional spiral and acts out recklessly. This leads her to a new romance with Carter Baizen, a rich kid school alumni who has shirked his own familial and adult responsibilities for a life of partying and world travel. Realizing Blair's spiral, Serena and Chuck work together to banish Carter from the Upper East Side to get Blair's life back on track. Seeking stability, Blair reconciles with Nate, her childhood sweetheart. Bart Bass tragically dies in a car crash, leading to his brother, Chuck's uncle Jack, arriving in the Upper East Side. The duplicitous Jack ousts the grieving Chuck from the Bass family's company to take full control for himself. Fortunately, Lily realizes that by legally adopting Chuck, she has enough power in the company to thwart Jack's schemes and return Chuck to his rightful place in charge. Blair finally realizes that she has fully moved on from her past love Nate, and breaks up with him to pursue Chuck once again. Unfortunately, the mysterious Gossip Girl publicly reveals that Blair had previously had an affair with Chuck's uncle Jack. Despite this revelation, Chuck finally affirms his own love for Blair, and the two share a passionate kiss. Meanwhile, following Bart's death, Lily and Rufus rekindle their old romance. And that's when Rufus discovers that while they were together 20 years ago, Lily had secretly gotten pregnant but gave their baby up for adoption. Jenny begins an internship with Blair's fashion designer mother Eleanor. Jenny proves to be a fashion savant, quickly earning Eleanor's respect. As Jenny's confidence grows, she leaves Eleanor's business in the hopes of starting her own company and begins neglecting her own schoolwork. As her father Rufus tries to keep her focused on her education, the young Jenny moves out of their apartment to pursue her business full-time. Unfortunately, the teenage Jenny is unable to get her business off the ground, and Eleanor helps her reconcile with her father and return to school. Jenny also develops a closer friendship with Vanessa, which becomes strained when they both develop romantic feelings toward Nate. Ultimately, Nate chooses to be with Vanessa, and as summer approaches, they make plans to go on a romantic getaway together. Elsewhere, Dan and Serena reconcile, but their romance proves short-lived, as neither can move on from their past hurt. Dan then begins a relationship with the new girl Amanda. Serena is devastated by how quickly Dan moved on, so Blair has her gang of mean girls antagonize and publicly humiliate Amanda. Dan believes that Serena is behind this act, further driving a wedge between the former lovers. With seemingly no hope of living down her past mean girl reputation, Serena decides to return to her old ways, ousting Blair to reclaim her crown as the school queen bee. And so the rivalry between Serena and Blair is reignited once again. Serena then becomes friends with a socialite named Poppy and begins an affair with Poppy's boyfriend Gabriel. Gabriel assures Serena he plans on breaking up with Poppy, but first needs her business contacts for investors to fund his new company. When Poppy discovers Gabriel's lies, they get into a huge fight, leaving Gabriel's business dead before it ever truly began. Wanting to help Gabriel, Serena invites him to a party thrown by her mother Lily to network with her wealthy friends. There, Gabriel secures hundreds of thousands of dollars in investments, including convincing Rufus to invest Dan's college funds. Unfortunately, this was all a scam orchestrated by Gabriel and Poppy, who take the money and run. Serena, Blair, Nate, and Chuck all band together to right Poppy's wrongs, even teaming up with a reformed Georgina to take down the villainous socialite. Unfortunately, their grand plan fails, resulting in Serena being arrested and Poppy escaping. When Georgina is unfairly blamed for the failed plot, she reverts to her old duplicitous ways and handles Poppy herself, taking down the socialite and reclaiming the stolen money. After leaving jail, Serena is visited by Carter Baizen, who has returned to the Upper East Side to inform her that he has discovered the location of her long-missing father, William. As the season comes to a close, Serena, Blair, Dan, Chuck, Nate, and Vanessa all graduate high school and prepare to attend their separate colleges. None of them know how their lives will unfold, but one thing is certain: their days of being terrorized by Gossip Girl are far from over. In Season 3 of Gossip Girl, Serena returns to the Upper East Side after failing in her search for her father, though she is now dating Carter Baizen. Due to Carter's villainous past, all of Serena's friends are skeptical of her decision to date him. Ultimately, Carter breaks up with Serena to work on an oil rig in Texas, believing it is a punishment he needs to endure to atone for his past sins. Serena then begins working for Nate's cousin, Trip Vanderbilt, who is elected as a congressman of New York. Serena and Trip then begin a romantic affair, despite Trip being married to a woman named Maureen. Maureen allows her husband to have this affair in secret to avoid public and political backlash. But when Trip and Serena get into a car accident, Trip abandons the injured Serena to avoid a scandal. Nate is furious at his cousin for his cruel actions and chooses to comfort Serena, confessing his own romantic feelings for her. This declaration of love leads to Serena and Nate beginning to date, inspiring jealousy in Jenny, who continues to harbor her own crush on Nate. Meanwhile, Serena's mother Lily and Dan and Jenny's father Rufus find and emotionally reconnect with their long-lost son Scott before getting married in front of their family and friends. And so, Serena is now the stepsister of Dan and Jenny. Elsewhere, Dan begins his freshman year at NYU alongside Blair, Vanessa, and the seemingly reformed Georgina. So reformed, in fact, that Dan finds himself in a bit of a friends with benefits situation with her. That comes to an end when Dan begins dating a movie star named Olivia. But after they have a threesome with Vanessa, Olivia realizes that Dan's true love is for her, leading them to break up and allowing Dan and Vanessa to explore their feelings for each other. Dan and Vanessa's burgeoning relationship is complicated when Vanessa accepts an internship that forces her to move to Haiti for 6 months, though Dan assures her that their love is strong enough to handle the distance. Meanwhile, Blair struggles adjusting to no longer being the most popular girl in school. She finds comfort in her boyfriend Chuck, who cashes out shares in his family's business to buy the Empire Hotel to forge his own path. When Chuck's long-presumed dead mother Elizabeth returns to New York, Blair offers her emotional support to her boyfriend. Unfortunately, this is all a ruse by Jack to trick his nephew and steal the Empire from Chuck. To protect her boyfriend and save his business, Blair agrees to spend the night with Jack in exchange for him standing down. When Blair discovers that Chuck was aware of this deal and was willing to let his girlfriend sell herself to save his hotel, she is devastated and breaks up with him. To win Blair back, Chuck helps her get accepted to her favored Columbia University for the next semester, and asks her to meet him for a date. When Blair fails to show up, Chuck assumes she no longer loves him and instead sleeps with Jenny. Blair then arrives late to profess her love for Chuck, who prepares to propose to his true love. Unfortunately, when Dan discovers Chuck and Jenny's tryst, the overprotective brother furiously confronts Chuck and reveals the truth to Blair, leading her to break up with Chuck once again and have Jenny banished from the Upper East Side. Eventually, Carter returns to the Upper East Side and Serena begins seeing him in secret behind Nate's back. Carter reveals that he has finally and definitively tracked down Serena's father William in Florida. But after Serena discovers that Carter has known this information for a long time and and only kept it a secret to spend more time with Serena, she admonishes him to find her father by herself. In Florida, Serena finally finds her father, but is shocked to discover that her mother Lily is also there. It turns out Lily has cancer, which she has kept a secret from her new husband Rufus, and has been visiting the Dr. William for treatment. The trio return to New York together to reveal this information to the shocked and devastated Rufus. William decides he wants to stay in New York to reconnect with his children Serena and Eric, and moves into their apartment building. Lily and Rufus are hesitant of this plan, as William is scheming to win back Lily's heart. And that's when Serena discovers a sinister truth about her father. After Lily first sought out treatment for her cancer, William fell back in love with her. After her cancer went into remission, William began supplying her with a medicine that mimicked cancer symptoms, tricking her into continuing to visit him and rely on him in her time of need. His fraud exposed, William flees the Upper East Side. And while Serena can't forgive her father, she does allow him to escape the authorities. Following this, Serena seeks comfort in Dan, leading to the two sharing a kiss and then innocently falling asleep together. Wanting to break up Serena and Nate, Jenny takes a photo of the pair and sends it to Gossip Girl, who publishes it for everyone to see. And so, Serena and Nate and Dan and Vanessa break up. As the season comes to a close, Serena and Blair prepare to leave for another summer break, vacationing together as friends in Paris. Dan decides to pursue his feelings for Serena once again and plans to profess his love for her before she leaves the city. Unfortunately, before he can, Georgina arrives to reveal that she is pregnant with his baby. And as a depressed and heartbroken Chuck is mugged on the street, he refuses to hand over the engagement ring he had bought for Blair. And so he is shot by his mugger and left to bleed to death. In season 4 of Gossip Girl, Serena and Blair return from their summer vacation together, where Blair had shared a date with Prince Louis Grimaldi of Monaco. Upon discovering that Chuck has survived his shooting and plans to run away to start a new life in Europe with his new girlfriend Ava, Blair convinces him to stay in New York, but also orchestrates his breakup with his new lover. And so, a furious Chuck declares war on Blair for revenge. At school together at Columbia University, Serena and Blair both try to join an elusive secret society known as Hamilton House, led by Nate's new girlfriend, Juliet. Juliet secretly schemes to turn Serena and Blair against each other, but the reconciled friends see through the ruse, exposing Juliet's machinations and having her ousted from Hamilton House. Juliet is secretly working on behalf of her imprisoned brother Ben, who has a secret vendetta against Serena, leading her to continue trying to ruin Serena's life, including publicly humiliating her by falsely leaking to Gossip Girl that she has an STD. Serena then begins dating one of her professors, Colin, who is secretly Juliet's billionaire cousin who funds her lifestyle. When Colin discovers Juliet's duplicitous ways, he cuts her off financially, and she is forced to leave Columbia University. Meanwhile, Dan has been living in secret with Georgina, raising their newborn baby Milo. Eventually, Georgina confesses that Dan is not in fact her child's father, and she and Milo move in with her parents. Dan is still in love with Serena, but upon discovering she is still conflicted between him and Nate, Dan chooses to get back together with Vanessa. After a jealous Vanessa works with Juliet to try to ruin Serena's life, Dan puts a permanent end to any future relationship with her. A heartbroken Vanessa then finds a manuscript for a book that Dan has written, recounting a fictionalized version of his and his friends' lives. Vanessa is impressed by the book and encourages Dan to have it published, but Dan refuses, fearing it will expose his friend's secrets. And so Vanessa steals the book and sells it to a publisher before leaving New York City for good. Dan and Blair then start internships at W Magazine and develop a friendship that eventually leads to a kiss. Although Dan has truly fallen for Blair, the kiss instead proves to Blair her continued love for Chuck. And that's when Prince Louis arrives in New York to pursue his feelings for Blair, leading to a whirlwind romance that ends with them getting engaged. Dan and Nate then both confess their continued love for Serena, who struggles in choosing between them. As Serena goes to tell Dan she loves him back, she is confronted and drugged by Juliet, leading her to be institutionalized for an apparent overdose. Juliet confronts Serena at the center, accusing her of falsely claiming that Ben had assaulted her at boarding school years prior, leading to his prison sentence. Serena swears she did no such thing, as Ben was actually a teacher who was always kind to her. And that's when Serena realizes that her mother Lily made the false accusation against Ben and forged Serena's name in an effort to help her return to school in the Upper East Side, as no private school was willing to accept her problematic history without something to blame it on. Serena is then released from the institution and confronts her mother, who then helps get Ben released from prison. As Serena helps Ben adjust to life on the outside, the two grow closer together and begin to date. Ultimately, Lily is arrested and sentenced to house arrest for perjury, while Ben can't move past his hurt from the Van Der Woodsen family and breaks up with Serena to move on with his life. Serena then finds comfort in her long-lost cousin Charlie Rhodes, who is struggling with her own mental health and develops feelings for Dan. Unbeknownst to Serena, Charlie is actually an imposter named Ivy, hired by Charlie's mother Carol, Lily's older sister, to help steal money from the real Charlie's trust fund. Elsewhere, Russell Thorpe, a business rival of Bass Industries, arrives in New York with his daughter Raina. The Thorpe family has long held a grudge against the Bass family, as long ago Bart had burned down a building to collect the insurance money, unaware that Russell's wife was still inside. And so now Russell and Raina secretly scheme to bring the Bass empire down. Despite this bitter rivalry between the warring families, Chuck and Raina begin to date. Eventually, their relationship becomes too complicated and they break up, leading to Raina pursuing a romance with Nate. Nate's father, the captain, is released from prison and moves back in with his son, though their relationship remains strained. The captain then gets a job working for the Thorpe family and uncovers their plans to take down Bass Industries. The captain warns Nate, who in turn grows to trust his father again. Unfortunately, Nate is now in a position where he is forced to choose between supporting his childhood best friend Chuck or his new lover Raina. Eventually, Nate discovers that it was in fact Raina's father Russell who was responsible for her mother's death. When Russell's true nature is exposed, he kidnaps Blair and holds her hostage in Chuck's newest hotel, threatening to burn it down with her still inside it. Chuck, Nate, and Raina work together to save her, and Russell is arrested. Chuck and Blair then spend another romantic night together, but Chuck ultimately decides that Blair should be with Prince Louis and get the fairy tale ending she deserves. And so, Chuck and Blair break up once again. In the end, Raina leaves New York for good, and the reconciled best friends Nate and Chuck choose to take a summer vacation together, away from their respective chaotic love lives. As the season ends, Blair prepares to travel to Monaco with Prince Louis, though she is unaware that she is in fact pregnant, and her unborn child's father remains a mystery. In Season 5 of Gossip Girl, Serena takes a job working in the film industry, and to impress her boss, she sets about securing the movie rights to Dan Humphrey's new popular book, Inside. That book causes a lot of drama in Dan's life due to his portrayals of his friends, most notably Serena, who was disappointed to read Dan's negative view of her, especially in comparison to his portrayal of Blair as a positive and central figure in his life. Dan agrees to sell the movie rights to Serena's boss, but when Serena discovers her boss's intentions to portray her former lover Dan negatively in the film, she selflessly kills the deal and is fired. Serena then takes a job working with Nate for a woman named Diana, who runs a website known as the New York Spectator, intended to be a direct competitor for Gossip Girl. While working for the Spectator, Nate develops a secret sexual relationship with his boss and discovers that his grandfather is secretly financing the website. After Diana is forced to resign due to a scandal, Nate replaces her as editor-in-chief and vows to report on the happenings of the Upper East Side in a more positive light, refusing to stoop to the levels of slander of Gossip Girl. Elsewhere, Dan is still madly in love with Blair, but is supportive of her when he learns of her pregnancy. Dan encourages Blair to take a paternity test, which reveals that Prince Louis is in fact her baby's father. Despite this, Blair can't deny her continued love for Chuck, and he offers to run away with her and raise the baby as his own. As the lovers depart, they get into a terrible car accident, resulting in Chuck being gravely injured and in critical condition, while Blair tragically loses her baby. Nate discovers that the car Blair and Chuck were in that crashed was originally intended for him. It turns out Nate's own cousin Trip had tampered with the car in an act of pettiness due to their grandfather favoring Nate and always pitting the boys against each other. Nate forgives Trip for his actions and affirms to his grandfather his desire to run the Spectator without his money or influence. When Chuck awakens from the accident, he discovers he received a blood transfusion that saved his life, but is unaware of who donated their blood. As Chuck tries to uncover the mysterious blood donor, he becomes suspicious of Diana. who seems to have a connection with his uncle Jack. Chuck then discovers that Diana runs a secret brothel where she is harboring an alive and well Bart Bass, who faked his own death to protect his family from a dangerous business rival, but emerged from hiding to donate his blood and save his son's life. Nate helps Diana flee the country to avoid repercussions for her shady dealings, while Chuck helps his father defeat his rival and re-emerge into a public life safely. Unfortunately, with Bart back in the Upper East Side, he reclaims control of his company and ousts his own son. A bitter Chuck then teams up with his scheming Uncle Jack to gain enough money to take back stakes in Bart Industries for themselves. After recovering from her injuries from the crash, Blair chooses to stay with Louis, confessing to Serena she made a vow to God to marry the prince if Chuck survived his injuries. And so Blair marries Louis, but also confesses to Chuck at her wedding that she will always love him. This confession is recorded and played to everyone at the wedding by Dan, thinking that thwarting the marriage would be in Blair's best interest. Louis tells Blair he no longer loves her, but they must remain married for the prince to avoid public humiliation, and for Blair to avoid having to pay a massive dowry her family can't afford. Stuck in a loveless marriage, Blair tries to find a way to get a divorce without ruining her family financially. She also begins dating Dan, despite discovering that he was the one who exposed the recording of her confessing her love for Chuck at the wedding. Wanting Blair to be happy and free to be with whoever she loves, Chuck pays off Blair's dowry to help her get out of her marriage. With her marriage to Prince Louis behind her, things start looking up for Blair. She is not only happily dating Dan, but is also named the new CEO of her mother's company, Waldorf Designs. Following Blair and Chuck's tragic accident, Gossip Girl chooses to retire, leaving the mantle to be taken up by Georgina, who then passes it off to Serena. When Serena's grandmother Cece dies, the duplicitous Ivy, still posing as family cousin Charlie, attempts to claim some of the inheritance money for herself. Ivy is thwarted when the real Charlie, now going by Lola, arrives to reunite with her family, unaware that an imposter had been trying to steal her life and her money. Ivy declares that despite her initial schemes, she has grown to love the Van Der Woodsen family, and now just wants to be accepted by them. Unfortunately, no one, especially Lily, trusts her. Serena then discovers that Lola's father is actually William, who'd had an affair with Lily's sister Carol years prior. Furious over this revelation, Lily exposes Carol's scheme to pay Ivy to pose as Charlie and steal Cece's inheritance, leading to Carol's arrest. In an act of revenge, Lola teams up with Ivy, funding a plot to ruin Lily's life. Lola also targets Serena for revenge, stealing her Gossip Girl credentials to publish Blair's diary to the public. Blair is distraught by this supposed betrayal and ends her friendship with Serena, kicking her out of their shared penthouse apartment. In her own act of petty revenge, Serena seduces Dan and secretly records it, with the intention of using the tape to ruin Dan and Blair's relationship. But before the tape is revealed, Blair realizes her true love is for Chuck, and so she breaks up with Dan. As Blair professes her love for Chuck, his insecurities about being kicked out of his family's company lead him to turning her down, fearing her new status as the CEO of Waldorf Designs would always overshadow his own accomplishments. As the season comes to a close, Blair refuses to accept Chuck's dismissal, affirming that their love is worth fighting for. Serena tries to rekindle her relationship with Dan, but he remains furious over her actions and instead departs for Italy with Georgina, where they will work together on a sequel to Inside and take down the residents of the Upper East Side once and for all. This leaves a remorseful and heartbroken Serena to fall back into her old drug habit. Lola begins dating Nate and returns Gossip Girl's control back to its mysterious original writer, while as thanks for helping her flee the country, Diana sends Nate evidence that will help him and the Spectator expose Gossip Girl's identity and take them down once and for all. In Season 6 of Gossip Girl, Serena Van Der Woodsen is living away from the Upper East Side as Sabrina, wanting a new life and fresh start. When Serena's friends track her down, she is dating an older man named Stephen Spence, who had previously had a fling with her mother Lily. Stephen's adult daughter Sage begins dating Nate and plots to break up her father and his new young lover. As Stephen prepares to propose to Serena, Sage shows him the sex tape of Serena and Dan. Stephen is disappointed in Serena's duplicitous actions, seducing and secretly recording Dan in an act of petty revenge, and so he breaks up with her. With the sex tape exposed publicly, Blair finally realizes that her best friend slept with her then boyfriend and feels betrayed by both, fracturing their relationships. Blair and Chuck make a pact not to get back together romantically until they've both achieved everything they desire in their respective individual careers. And so Blair dives into her work at Waldorf Designs, while Chuck focuses on taking down his father. Meanwhile, Nate struggles running the Spectator as it fails to generate enough profit to stay afloat. To save his business, Nate reluctantly steals some tricks from his father, the captain, and doctors his earnings. When Bart Bass discovers this, he blackmails Nate into giving him control of the Spectator, forcing Nate to only publish positive stories about him and also secure his help in taking down Chuck. Elsewhere, Lily has her marriage to Rufus annulled to return to her presumed dead husband, Bart Bass. Ivy, still secretly scheming to destroy Lily's life, moves in with Rufus, and they begin a romantic affair of their own. With Ivy's financial support, Rufus opens up his own art gallery, but to spitefully attack her ex-husband and his new younger lover, Lily hosts her own competing art auction. In turn, Rufus and Ivy crash the auction and buy one of the most valuable paintings. Unfortunately for Lily, Bart then reveals that he had previously dealt in illegal oil trading in Sudan, evidence of which had been stored in the painting. When Chuck discovers his father's illegal business dealings, he races to obtain the evidence for himself. Unfortunately for him, Rufus discovers that Ivy is cheating on him with none other than William Van Der Woodsen. Realizing he had been manipulated by his young lover, Rufus retrieves the evidence and returns it to Lily, allowing the ex-spouses to remain cordial and loyal, if not romantic. Chuck is devastated to discover Lily burning the evidence, ruining his chances to bring down his father. It's only after Chuck and Blair find proof that Bart had murdered a business rival that Lily finally understands the depths of her husband's villainy and abandons him to align with Chuck. A desperate Bart then threatens Blair's life to force Chuck to drop his schemes and leave the country. And so Chuck shares an emotional goodbye with Blair before departing on a plane for Russia. When that plane crashes, Blair is devastated, only for Chuck to reveal he never actually boarded the plane and is now living proof that his father tried to have his own son killed. Chuck and Bart then fight, resulting in Bart being knocked off the rooftop and hanging over the edge for his life. Chuck and Blair allow Bart to fall to his death, finally ridding themselves of his treachery. With Bart dead, Nate is given back control of the Spectator, while Chuck resumes control of Bart Industries and finally allows himself to be with Blair. Bart's death is ruled an accident, and Chuck and Blair get married in front of their family and friends. Following Bart's death, Ivy reveals that she has been working with William Van Der Woodsen to destroy Lily's life. And that's when William reveals that he was actually just using Ivy in his own Machiavellian plot to win back Lily's heart. And so Ivy's plan fails, and Lily and William romantically reconcile. Meanwhile, Serena finally realizes her past mistakes and makes amends with Blair and Dan. Dan and Georgina have written the sequel to Inside, but after failing to land a new book deal, they begin publishing individual chapters online, each targeting a different person. As Serena and Dan finally reconcile and begin to date once again, Dan chooses to continue with the scheduled release of his negative chapter centered on Serena. Serena is humiliated by the chapter and feels betrayed by Dan, causing all of her friends to ostracize him. Thinking there's nothing left for her in New York City, Serena makes plans to move to Los Angeles and start a new life. Before she can leave, Dan affirms he has always loved her and gives Nate his final chapter to post in the Spectator, shockingly revealing that he is and has always been Gossip Girl. Knowing he was an outsider to the affluent residents of the Upper East Side, Dan created Gossip Girl to help insert himself in the upper echelon drama and solidify himself as part of their world. His identity exposed, everyone is furious at Dan for his actions, but ultimately they realize any hate they received was merely the consequences for their own actions, and they've all been forced to grow into the better people they are today. And so Dan is forgiven, and Serena chooses to stay in New York City, realizing the Upper East Side is where she will always belong. 5 years later, Chuck and Blair are both highly successful and happily married with a son. Lily is still with William, while Rufus is dating the singer Lisa Loeb. The complicated figures Georgina and Jack are now dating, Nate is still running the now thriving Spectator and considering a run for mayor, and Serena and Dan get married in front of all of their family and friends, ready to live happily ever after. As the series comes to a close, a new generation of students take over the Upper East Side, making it only a matter of time until a new outsider takes on the mantle of Gossip Girl.